Arriving in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius to meet EU foreign ministers, the US Secretary of State John Kerry was urged to hold off on military action against Syria until the UN inspectors report on the alleged chemical weapon attacks which ignited global concern. The French just days ago hailed as America's oldest ally, now also urging caution ahead of the report. The EU is divided on the merits of airstrikes, yet united in revulsion at the crime.
In the face of this cynical use of chemical weapons, the international community cannot remain idle. A clear and strong response is crucial to make clear that such crimes are unacceptable and that there can be no impunity.
But the fighting continues. These pictures, which can't be authenticated, are thought to show trench-like exchanges between rebels and the Syrian army around Damascus. After the G20 meeting, the international community remains deeply divided in its response. Back in Washington, President Barack Obama has stepped up his lobbying for military strikes in response to what he says are grave violations by the Syrian forces which cannot be ignored. But he still has to win over a divided Congress and a sceptical nation ahead of the vote next week.
We cannot turn a blind eye to images like the ones we've seen out of Syria. Failing to respond to this outrageous attack would increase the risk that chemical weapons could be used again, that they would fall into the hands of terrorists who might use them against us. And it would send a horrible signal to other nations that there would be no consequences for their use of these weapons, all of which would pose a serious threat to our national security.
But as the world agonizes, the fighting and the suffering in Syria continue. The element of surprise has been lost, and President Assad has had time to prepare.
What you're seeing is the rhetoric ahead of the policy, and it's given, of course, the Syrians time to move their assets around to make it very, very difficult for any aerial bombardment to succeed. So whilst the world looks to the White House for leadership, Assad arguably is getting his pieces lined up to make it much more difficult for any potential bombardment from the West.
For the US President, these images of the victims of a chemical weapons attack show a red line has been crossed, and it demands more than strong words. But the international community is pulling in different directions and asking what, if anything, a military strike can realistically achieve. Rob Broomby, BBC News.